research indicates that the average age a child sees porn online is 11, sometimes younger for boys, sometimes a bit older for girls. And we also see in that same research that the earlier that a child is exposed to porn, the more likely and irreversible the rewiring of their brain becomes. A rewiring that makes them more likely to become sexually promiscuous as teens, to engage in sexual violence. This leads to more rapes, more abortions, more unwanted babies, more STDs, more damaged bodies, more broken hearts. All in adolescents who are years away from having a frontal lobe that can properly predict the consequences of their actions. Right now, because of legal, accessible porn, young people can access it all with a tap on their screen. On TikTok, where the hashtag KinkTalk has more than 6.9 billion views, and hashtag Choke has 375.5 million views, there are thousands of videos of young teenagers engaging in BDSM, including suffocation, choking, copying what they've seen on porn sites like Pornhub. Journalist Nicholas Kristof wrote a groundbreaking piece for the New York Times in 2020 titled "The Children of Pornhub." He details the children who have been affected by the pervasiveness of pornography and the ease with which anyone, including a minor, can become a producer and distributor of porn. In Kristof's research, he found that Pornhub, which is visited millions of times a day, is infested with videos of rape, including the rape of children. Monetized video compilations under titles like Screaming Teen, She Can't Breathe, or Extreme Choking are all available on Pornhub, all accessible to anyone with Wi-Fi, no matter their age. All attempts by states to require age verification to access Pornhub have been viciously opposed by the company. Child sex abuse material, typically referred to as child pornography, is rampant on thousands of porn sites today. The most heinous acts imaginable, including the violent rape of infants, are right now being monetized online, not on the dark web, but on legally run websites. Yes, this kind of material is illegal, but the abundant availability of legal pornography is what makes it so hard to restrict. To again use Pornhub as an example, some of the most popular searches are 14-year-old or girls under 18. These videos are protected because its distributor can claim without any verification that these girls are just acting, that they're really 18 years old. As long as pornography is legally available, this will be their excuse. This will be a problem. And it's not just a problem for children, it's a problem for the adults in the industry too. Abortion kills a child, and because it kills a child, that child right now has the right to legal protection not to be murdered. And that's also how I view pornography, is that of course there is the possibility of a backlash. Of course there are pragmatic obstacles to it, and I see the difficulty in that. However, right now we are talking about people being exploited and objectified, and I believe as image bearers of God, they have the right now under the law to not be. And so for the sake of their protection, and because it is wrong and should be illegal to monetize someone's objectification, I think that the law can be a very good teacher, because the law can be a teacher. The law can create stigma. The law can teach a lesson that something is wrong and deserves to be pushed into the dark corners of the internet, or the dark corners of reality, or back alleys, or whatever. That's how abhorrent that action is. And I think the law has the possibility to change minds in this case as well. It's the same thing that we've seen with gay marriage. Most people weren't on board with gay marriage when Obergefell was decided in 2015, and of course things have really changed. And so, of course, I would love for hearts and minds to change. Of course I believe that. It's the same thing with abortion. Of course, I believe that we should be caring for those women. We should be fighting for their dignity, not just politically, but on the personal level. And pro-lifers already do that, by the way. And Christians already are leading the charge against pornography. Like you were talking about how there are tools in certain places to block pornography. Well, Covenant Eyes has been around for 20 years, and you can download these applications and these softwares to block pornography on your phone. So Christians have already been leading the charge for so long to change hearts and minds. We can do that forever and ever, but eventually we've got to say, okay, but do these people not legally deserve to be protected from this exploitation? Do they or do they not? I think that they do. And I am not trying to minimize any of the potential trade-offs. I'm also a conservative. But I want my government to be big enough to ban the slaughter of babies. I want my government to be big enough to legally stop the objectification of particularly women and children. And that will require heavy restrictions of pornography. Millennials, actually, we don't get a lot of credit for very many things, and rightfully so. However, I think that we were born at just the right time to where I see the damage of social media. Unlike, I would say, like my oldest siblings who are like 10 and a half years older than me, great parents, but they just weren't raised with the iPhone like I was. I got an iPhone when I was 15 years old. He got one when he was out of college. So just a big difference. I think that we realize the risk of social media and its usage and screens and things like that more than Generation X and the older millennials, but we weren't so infected by it and so addicted to it that we're not numb to its effects too. So I think that we have a kind of a balanced understanding of the goods of technology and also the importance of regulating it, especially for our kids. I interviewed a dad last year, and this doesn't have to do with porn really specifically, but I don't know, he's probably in his 40s or so, and he had a straight A student, a son, 16 years old, and because they trusted him, they thought he's responsible and he's, making good grades, he's on the football team. They allowed him to have his phone anytime he wanted to. He was on Instagram. He ended up being a victim of sextortion, and he killed himself that night. And this father now is so brave. He's coming on my show and other people's platforms talking to parents about, you think that you know what's going on behind that screen. You don't. Even your most responsible kid, even your sweetest kid, even the kid who would never do anything wrong, they don't have the ability, once they've stumbled upon that conversation, that image, they often don't really have the self-control, as Charles was saying, to be able to resist that. Gosh, we're putting so much responsibility on kids these days to be able to do what many adults can't even do, and that's resist pornography. And so, I don't know if that answers your question, but I've just realized more and more what a detriment and how damaging just access to any internet is for young people.
Yeah. My name is Heike. I go to Baylor University. Allie, I'm a big fan. As someone who was exposed to pornography at age 11, I definitely know the effects, and so I appreciate you guys coming to speak to us. I wanted to ask if, let's say we were successfully able to ban pornography, what effect, whether culturally or legally, do you think that would have on the pervasiveness of homosexuality or transgenderism in our society, if any?
Well, I think it would have an effect. I don't have data for you. I don't have numbers to show the quantifiable effect that it has had, but because of one thing I mentioned, and I was just shocked to see them on camera admit this in the undercover investigation that I referenced, but one of the employees of ALO, which is the parent company of Pornhub, saying that is how their algorithms work. And of course, they see it as a good thing, is that they purposely are trying to get particularly male users who are looking usually at heterosexual content. They might suggest over on the side, what about this transgender content? What about this homosexual content? Now, I am not saying that is the number one driver of homosexuality or transgenderism, but I think that we would be foolish to say that it doesn't have any effect, that there is no potential impact, because pornography has the power to rewire your brain and to change your desires. That's actually the people who are sex positive and pro pornography, they say that is a positive thing. You have to Be promiscuous and watch porn to see what you like. Really, porn is telling you what to like. So I think it would have an effect, definitely have an effect on transgenderism. I have the somewhat unpopular opinion that transgenderism, particularly in men, is primarily driven by pornography. And so I think that we would see a lot of that go away because transgenderism in men is primarily a sexual fetish, not gender dysphoria or confusion. And that is driven by the pervasiveness of very, very disgusting forms of pornography. So I think that it would help a lot in that particular regard. Liberals and libertarians often argue, well, why should we prevent consenting adults from doing what they want to do on camera? We should allow them to make money how they want to. If it's through filmed sex, then so be it. First, I take issue with this flimsy model of consent-based morality. There is more to morality than consent. If a person consents to being objectified, that's still objectification. And viewing people as objects is wrong and damaging. We don't have to dig very deep to see how viewing people as objects is nothing more than vessels for our passions, be they sexual or violent, causes immense individual and societal harm. And even if consent were the only thing that mattered in deciding whether porn should be legally accessible, it would not pass the test. Because there is no way to know whether the people in pornographic videos are consenting. Even if they consented initially, we have no way of knowing whether they continue to consent throughout the entire production. Some of the most popular pornographic videos right now are of scared-looking or unconscious-seeming women being assaulted by multiple men. We have no way of knowing if these women or men have been groomed or trafficked at some point in their lives. We have no way to verify true consent. Porn is the legal loophole for trafficking, rape, prostitution, and child sex abuse. And not only does legal porn make these horrific acts available, it makes them profitable. Let me say that again. Sexually degrading women and children is profitable because pornography is legal. Pornography is also addictive in nature. Like drugs, it stimulates the brain and the body in a way that makes the user crave not just more porn, but more extreme porn. But unlike many drugs, it is, of course, legal and celebrated. Legal porn between consenting, quote-unquote, adults is the starting point for those who eventually find their way to child sex abuse or other violent material. And while not all porn users become pedophiles or sexual abusers, you would be hard-pressed to find a pedophile or a sexual abuser who was not first a porn user. Users who don't become abusers are still harmed by porn, and so are the ones closest to them. Anti-trafficking organization Exodus Cry has compiled several studies citing the harms of porn. Research from multiple studies demonstrates a correlation between frequent porn usage and acceptance of rape in males as young as 14. You actually lose some gray matter in your brain the more often you watch porn. Frequent use of porn kills real-life intimacy because real bodies and real sex rarely live up to the produced performances of porn. It holds men and women to unrealistic sexual expectations, making reality a consistent disappointment, which means that it fuels insecurity, jealousy, discontentment, anger, tearing down relationships, destroying marriages and families, which we understand are necessary for the survival and flourishing of any community or nation. Pornography also informs and exacerbates disturbing sexual trends, including transgenderism. An undercover operation by Sound Investigations revealed via the admission of employees of Pornhub's parent company that the Pornhub algorithm feeds trans and homosexual content to users who typically only view heterosexual content. And this is likely effective. Both of the creators and directors of The Matrix are men who now identify as women. And one of the Wachowski brothers recently admitted publicly that a common genre of pornography called sissy pornography actually, quote, made him trans. And of course, we know the destruction that transgenderism has wrought on society, normalizing the barbaric practice of butchering bodies, even children's bodies. There is no upside to porn. No positives, no benefits. It is only ever damaging, degrading, and destructive. Its legality and its consequential availability and profitability is a scourge on our country, and it is my belief that if there is a will to be rid of it, there is a way. The truth is, we as a society and our leaders do not seem to have the will because, if we're honest, we don't think it's as abhorrent as we should. Porn is obscene. It is generally agreed upon that obscenity is not protected by the First Amendment, but defining obscenity is difficult, even with precedents like the Miller test. Nailing down what counts artistically or artistically or socially valueless is infamously tough. But the First Amendment has always had limits. There have always been things that we cannot say in contexts in which speech is limited. The ability to define obscene, irredeemable content isn't beyond us. We know what pornography looks like when children are involved, and we have outlawed it. We can do the same for all kinds of pornography. We can, at the very least, make producing and platforming pornography legally and financially risky. We can enforce the obscenity laws already on the books. We can enforce things like Title 18, Section 1465 of the U.S. Code. States can continue to pass restrictions like age verification laws that require verification of age for both consumers of and performers in pornography. We can hold the platforms liable for allowing abuse, trafficking, and other kinds of exploitation. We can outright ban free internet porn so that consuming porn requires an ID and a credit card. Laws can pressure credit card companies to not work with pornography sites or charge exorbitant fees to these sites. There are possibilities. There are ways. It would take more time than I have, and I'm probably already out of time, to go through the history of obscenity laws in our country, the Supreme Court cases, the legal tests, but America has accomplished greater and more complicated feats than banning porn. I have hope that we are up to the task. In every policy decision that we make, we balance freedom against other values, such as safety, for example. Many times, freedom wins out. But freedom untethered by virtue, unfettered by moral limits, is anarchy. And anarchy always harms the most vulnerable, the most powerless first, before wreaking havoc everywhere else. Porn is anarchy. It's anarchy that benefits the corporations profiting from exploitation. As in so many things, when it comes to porn, freedom for the pike is death for the minnow. Freedom to produce and platform porn for the sake of what I believe to be a wrong-headed view of the First Amendment is death and destruction for everyone else. Thank you.
Allie and Charles, thank you for being here today. I might ask, what can we do as students that are coming here and then going back to our campuses? What can we do to raise this awareness about the effects of pornography?
Yeah, and sorry, I can't see you, so if I'm not looking in the right direction, I'm sorry about that. But yeah, I mean, just on a personal level, I don't know how dudes talk to each other about this kind of stuff. Maybe it's more awkward than girls talking about it, because it's increasingly also a female issue, consumption of porn, absolutely, more than it used to be in the past. But it seems to still be lopsided towards men, because men and women are different. Our drives are different. Our psychology is different. And so I think women can kind of talk about it in a more abstract way that maybe makes it more comfortable, whereas most men have viewed porn at some point. And so talking about it from a very personal perspective, I understand, could probably be very difficult and vulnerable. And yet it is that kind of vulnerability in talking about the impact that porn has had in your own life, on your relationships, or on the lives and relationships of people in your life, people that you are close to, that can really make an impact. Because what we're hearing out there is that it's just no big deal. There are even activists who say that it's not addictive in nature, that it's actually conspiracy to say that pornography is addictive at all. That's real. It's a talking point out there. And that it's fine. It's just a healthy part of sexuality, and it's so clearly not. And so being the first one that's willing to have those conversations with friends, to not egg on those conversations that are just in good fun, that objectifies women or objectifies other people, I think that's probably a good place to start. I'm sure maybe Charles has other suggestions too, even from the male perspective, but certainly as Christians, like, we can start there. We can start from the biblical perspective too, that, gosh, Jesus said that it was better to gouge out our eye than to look lustfully at a woman. And if you've looked lustfully, then you've already committed adultery with her in your heart. And so if I'm speaking to a group of Christians here, of course, that is the objective standard that we can stand on as well. Take 8 minutes at all. I don't have the same technological background and understanding the coding and the zeros and ones. I do appreciate the practical difficulties that would go into regulating, restricting something like pornography. And I do understand that with every policy that you're implementing, every time that you're asking the government to step in, you are absolutely asking for a trade-off. I simply believe that whatever difficulty we may face in banning porn or severely, strictly regulating porn, even the big wigs of pornography like Pornhub is worth it. I think it is an acceptable trade-off, and we've already seen what that looks like. I actually don't think that prohibition is a good comparison at all, because alcohol is not inherently in itself abusive. It is not inherently in itself immoral and objectifying. Someone can have a glass of wine or maybe even a bottle of wine and be okay. That can be healthy. That can be something that someone does on a daily basis, but there is no healthy way to use porn. There is no healthy, moderate consumption of the objectification of another human being. So I don't think that's a good comparison. And I'm not sure that Charles made this argument, but I have heard that similar to prohibition, that banning something like pornography, it's just going to push it into the dark web and it's just going to make things worse. But that could be said for any law. Anything that we ban. I mean, that is basically what they say about abortion. And I assume I'm among a lot of pro-lifers here, that if we ban abortion or we restrict abortion, that it's going to be moved to back alleys. But what we remember when we are talking about abortion is that abortion affects an innocent human being. And the same thing is true of pornography. And so just like child pornography, even though it still exists on the dark web, and as I argue it still exists on these pornography websites that are there because it's legal. We still have said, you know what, that trade-off is acceptable. Whatever effort the government has to make, the state has to make to step in and hold consumers and producers of child porn liable, that is an acceptable trade-off. And I'm saying that I think that we can and should do that with pornography in general. Even if your only concern is child pornography, again, as I said, legal porn is the loophole for child pornography and trafficking and the monetization of rape. So I don't deny that it would be difficult, that there are practical obstacles, and I think that's absolutely worth debating. That's true when it comes to any policy debate, but when we are talking about the exploitation, objectification, and abuse of human beings, and then we look at the ripple effect that that has had on our society, I'm not sure if there are very many other debates more worth having than this one. So it's not enough for me to simply say the trade-off would be too much. I don't want the state to step in here. If we don't want the state to step in when it comes to the monetization of rape online, then I'm not sure where else we would draw the line. So it's worth any pragmatic difficulties and policy debates that we may have. And again, I think in general, it is an acceptable trade-off.